24 ordinary college students, a fake prison built in a basement, and 6 days that would become the most infamous experiment in the history of psychology. There were no criminals here, no real guards, just students, sorted by the flip of a coin. Half were told, "You are prisoners." Half were told, "You are guards." Within days, the guards were humiliating the prisoners, stripping them, putting bags over their heads. The prisoners were breaking down, sobbing, begging to leave. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks. They shut it down in 6 days. And for 50 years, the world was told what it meant, that there is a monster sleeping inside every one of us, and the right situation will wake it up. There's just one problem. Almost everything you've heard about this experiment is not quite true. The year is 1971. A young psychologist named Philip Zimbardo had a question that had haunted the field for a decade. When something terrible happens, a prison riot, an atrocity, a guard beating an inmate, we always ask the same thing. What kind of person does that? What is wrong with them? Zimbardo suspected we were asking the wrong question. Maybe it isn't the person. Maybe it's the place. Maybe you could take perfectly normal, decent young men, and the situation alone would turn them cruel. So he decided to build the situation and see what it did to them. He placed an ad in the local paper. Male college students needed for a study of prison life. $15 a day. More than 70 young men answered. They were tested, screened, interviewed. The most stable, the most ordinary, the most psychologically healthy 24 were chosen. No history of violence, no history of crime. The kind of young men you'd trust to babysit your kids. Then came the coin flip. Heads. You're a guard. Tails. You're a prisoner. Pure chance. That detail matters, remember it. The prison was real enough to feel real. A corridor in the basement of the Stanford psychology building converted into cells. Barred doors, no windows, no clocks. A closet labeled the hole for solitary confinement. The prisoners were stripped, deloused, and dressed in smocks with numbers. No names, only numbers. A chain on one ankle. A stocking cap to erase their hair. The guards got something else entirely. Khaki uniforms, wooden batons, and mirrored sunglasses so no one could ever see their eyes. Every choice had a purpose. Take away the face, take away the name, and you take away the person. Psychologists call it de-individuation. When you stop being you, the rules that held you back start to loosen. The first day was almost boring. Awkward young men play-acting cops and robbers, half embarrassed, not sure how to behave. It did not stay boring. By the second day, the prisoners rebelled, ripped off their numbers, barricaded their cells, and the guards' response told you everything. They didn't call the researchers, they improvised. They blasted the prisoners with a fire extinguisher, stripped them naked, took away their beds, threw the ringleaders into the hole. And then they got creative. Push-ups for punishment. Counting drills in the middle of the night, forcing prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands. The cruelty wasn't in the rule book. The guards invented it themselves. Not all of them. Some guards were tough. Some were fair. And a few went out of their way to be kind, doing small favors when no one was watching. But it was the cruelest guards who set the tone, and no one stopped them. By day 3, a prisoner known as 8612 was screaming, shaking, burning up inside. They let him go. Then another broke. Then another. A prisoner went on a hunger strike, and the guards turned the others against him. Here's the part of the story that gets left out. There was one person who could have stopped it at any moment. The man running the experiment, Philip Zimbardo himself. But Zimbardo hadn't just designed the prison. He'd given himself a role inside it, prison superintendent. And slowly, he stopped being a scientist watching an experiment and became a warden protecting his institution. When a rumor spread that a released prisoner might come back to break the others out, Zimbardo spent his day trying to stop the breakout instead of asking why his study had a breakout at all. It took an outsider. A young psychologist named Christina Maslach came to see the study. She looked at the prisoners being marched to the toilet with bags over their heads, and she was horrified. She told Zimbardo that what he was doing to these boys was terrible. Of more than 50 people who had seen the experiment, she was the first to question whether it was ethical. The next day, Zimbardo shut it down. 6 days into a 2-week study, for decades, the lesson seemed obvious and it was unforgettable. It wasn't 24 bad apples. It was a bad barrel. Good people, dropped into a toxic situation, given a uniform, a role, and permission, will do things they would never imagine. Zimbardo gave it a name: the Lucifer effect. The line between good and evil, he said, is not a wall around a few monsters. It runs through the middle of every human heart, and the situation decides which side you're standing on. It was a beautiful, terrifying idea. It went into every psychology textbook on Earth. It was taught to millions. And 30 years later, when photographs came out of American soldiers abusing prisoners at Abu Ghraib, Zimbardo went on television and said, "I have seen this before. In a basement at Stanford. It's not the apples, it's the barrel. The story you were just told is the version in the textbooks. It is powerful, it is famous, and it is in important ways a performance. Start with the guards. We're told the situation alone made them cruel. But before the study began, Zimbardo's team gathered the guards and told them exactly what they wanted. Be tough. Create fear. Make the prisoners feel powerless." One of Zimbardo's assistants, David Jaffe, personally coached a guard to be more aggressive when he was being too soft. The famous natural cruelty was in part assigned. Then there's the most iconic breakdown, the prisoner screaming to be let out. Decades later, that prisoner, a man named Douglas Corpy, said something that should have ended the legend on its own. He wasn't having a breakdown, he was acting. He wanted to leave to study for his exams. Found out he couldn't simply quit and put on a show to get released. And the numbers. We remember the cruelty as if it were universal, but only about a third of the guards were consistently cruel. Many were neutral. Some were kind. The "everyone becomes a monster" headline was built from the worst of them. There were never proper controls, no second group. No way to separate the situation from the instructions. The participants knew they were in a study, knew what was expected, and many later said they were simply giving the experimenter what he wanted. Psychologists have a name for that too. Demand characteristics. When you tell people the result you're hoping for, a lot of them will hand it to you. Years later, 2 researchers tried to run it again on camera for the BBC. The guards did not spontaneously turn brutal. Sometimes the prisoners took over. The clean, automatic descent into evil didn't reproduce. So the Stanford prison experiment was less a controlled experiment and more a piece of improv theater with a conclusion the director had decided before the curtain went up. So was it all a lie? No. And this is the part that's easy to miss in the backlash. Zimbardo oversold his evidence. He directed the result, then presented it as if it had happened on its own. The clean story, the situation turns anyone into a monster automatically. That story is a myth. But look at what he was pointing at. Put ordinary people in a system that gives them power over others, strips away accountability, hands them a uniform and a permission slip, and a meaningful number of them will abuse it. Not because the situation hypnotizes everyone, but because the situation gives the cruelty somewhere to hide and an excuse to lean on. Milgram had shown it with a shock generator. Abu Ghraib showed it with real prisoners and real guards who were never part of any study. The mechanism Zimbardo dramatized is real, even if the drama was staged. The clean number was a myth. The thing underneath it was not. Here's what survives. Once you strip away the legend, the danger was never that abasement turns good people evil at the flip of a switch. The danger is quieter and worse. It's that we are astonishingly willing to become whatever the role, the uniform and the person in charge tell us to be, and then call it just following the situation. The guards at Stanford were coached, but they didn't refuse. Corpy was acting, but the system that trapped him was real enough that he had to act his way out. The cruelty was encouraged, and most people went along. The experiment didn't prove we are all monsters. It proved something more uncomfortable, that we will put on almost any costume we're handed, and then forget we're the ones wearing it. So here's the question this experiment can't actually answer for you. But you can, if they handed you the khaki uniform, the baton, the mirrored sunglasses that hide your eyes, and told you these people are your prisoners and no one is watching. Would you stay yourself? Almost everyone is certain they would, and that certainty is exactly what the man in the basement was counting on. 24 ordinary students, a fake prison, 6 days, and a story we keep telling about other people that was really about us all along.